So this is the movie for Excel, Chapter 8, Pause and Practice number 3. And so this pause and practice is about getting data from external sources. So that's where those other files that we downloaded from the Dropbox are going to come in. So first of all, I want to define this term here. Query is a combination of instructions, filters, and formats that establish a connection to and displays data. So you can have queries, and I like to think of queries as questions. So you have a question that you need answered about some part of your business, so you can build a query, and then the results of that query, what's called the result set, will give you the information or the answer to the question that you're posing. And one of the other things that we're going to look at are pivot tables. And pivot tables are extremely useful. They are ways to analyze multiple data to get some kind of statistical calculation across that data. So a comparison of two or more elements and getting some kind of a calculation like a sum, an average, account, and then you can build trends from that. So the first thing that we need to do is take a look at our combined sales worksheet. So combined sales. So there's a lot of data on this. We have it up to row 48, and we have our date, the product ID, department, description, sold, and unit price. So this data should be familiar to you. We've been looking at it pretty much all year. So, but we're going to do some different things with this data. So, all right. So let's see. We're going to find combined sales, and we're going to use the get pivot data function to in conjunction with the pivot table in the analysis toolpack to get a clean data model. And we're going to build two queries as a source for the pivot table. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do here is we're going to select I5, department totals for apparel. So we're going to type equal, and then we want to find our pivot table tab worksheet. So I'm going to come over here. I want to find B4. Okay, so if we look at what we're picking, we're looking at the total sold for apparel. Okay, that's derived in this simple pivot table. Go ahead and press enter. So I'm going to come back up and show you. It just says equal pivot table exclamation B4. Okay. So now we're going to select I6, and we're going to use the get pivot data to display the total for gifts. So in this case, we're going to go to I6. Okay, so we've positioned ourselves in I6, and this time, instead of what we did here, we're going to just, from this spot, we're going to do, okay, so I think I'm going to stop here for a second and come over to pivot table so you can see where we're going with this. So I'm going to come over here to pivot table. And I have my pivot table fields showing. So if yours are not showing, you can come up to pivot table, analyze, and add the field list. Because it's important that you know what the fields are that you're looking at, okay? So department is this apparel, gift, health aid, right? If I check that off, do you see it goes away? Let me undo that because I just messed it up. Description is this here, right? Magnet, pen, and then sold is this field, okay? So before you can start really understanding how to use the get pivot data, you need to know what the data is. So let me go back and I actually typed this one in. So let's analyze what this is. So I did a get pivot data and always put a parentheses, and then I put sold inside quotes because remember, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to snag this so we can see it while we're in this table. So let me just bring this over here. Okay. Okay. So these are the field names that we care about. So when we're typing this in, darn it, Helen. Sold is what we want, right? So we're looking at, first of all, department totals. So we're going to use department, and the department that we care about in this row would be apparel, this row would be gift, this row would be health aid. Pivot table is, this element is just a reference to the starting point of the pivot table, okay? Then what we care about for this is that department is gift, okay? Sold is what we want to bring back out of this pivot table where department is gift, okay? So let's build the next one. So we're going to do equal get pivot data. The data field that we want is, we're trying to find sold. So inside quotes, I do sold. The pivot table is just the first cell of the pivot. So A3, and I believe, well, we can always come back and do that, comma, then what is the field that we're limiting it to, and that's department, and that's inside quotes. And what is department have to equal to? Well, right now we're looking at health aid, so we're going to do health aids. So what I figured out is that there's 2 spaces here in health aid. 1, 2 blanks. So I had health spaced aids, and it's health space aids. So everything else was correct. So we can go ahead and do that, and we get 101. So the thing about I can close this out now. The thing about using the get pivot data is when the pivot table itself changes, this data will not. So I'm going to show you what that means as soon as I get my instructions back up. Okay, so now what we're going to do is demonstrate why get pivot data is nice. So If you look at my combined sales, I have, looking at this, you wouldn't see any difference. So the first one, remember, we just referenced before. The other ones we used the get pivot data, right, to pull out what we wanted. So now if I go to my pivot data tab and I look at my actual pivot pivot table, I want to take this department and bring it from a row to a column. And look, so it changes the way that this pivot table is organized. So now we're seeing these departments across the top. So if I go back to combined sales, look, it didn't matter to gift or health aid. It understood that you rearranged it. The one that we just referenced, it no longer works. Okay, so that's why the get pivot data is very meaningful when you're trying to reference outside of a pivot table a piece of data, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and look at formatting a pivot table. So we're going to come here and click in a cell in the pivot table, and we're going to come up here to design, and we want pivot, and it's in the medium style. We want to find 8. So it's this second row gray one. Then we want, what else do we want? We want, I'm going to expand this a bit. Let's see, we want in the grand totals, I'm going to click, we want grand totals on for columns only, right? So look, this grand total here as a whole column is not there, it's just at the bottom. And then what else do we need to do? Okay, so that's it for that. I'm going to stop this movie at this point, and we'll pick up with the analysis tool pack here at the end. All right, thank you.